So, hi, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with the SAP IP Business Talks. And this time, so here in Europe, it's quite late for the business talks, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, but for good reason, because this time we are in the United States in San Jose. And this will be a fascinating talk because we have a fascinating guest today, Stephen Key. I will say some words about him, but for the moment, I just want to give you some of our housekeeping rules. So there's a chat in LinkedIn to this live session, and you are invited to ask Stephen questions, to contribute comments, whatever you think is appropriate, and then I will interrupt our discussion and use and pick up that when it is when it fits anyhow to what we have planned so far, and or it's just interesting. Very happy to do so. You're invited to join us here with your comments. So, Stephen, thank you very much for joining us. I'm very happy that you are here. So, whoever is on LinkedIn, at least is on LinkedIn, will know you in the IP field. So, you are pretty much experienced in all of that aspects of inventorship, of enforcement of IP, of protecting invention. So this is absolutely great, and I'm again and again completely astonished and overwhelmed of your work and this wealth of knowledge. So I'm very happy that you are here. And yeah, my first question is always the same, and I think it's a good question. How did you came into that field?
Well, that's a long story, but I'll make it short. I didn't think anybody would ever hire me because I didn't have any skills, so I figured I would just start my own company. And I thought the best way to do that was maybe come out with ideas and see if I could sell those ideas to companies. And I learned a lot about product licensing. So what do? I come up with ideas, inventions, and I license those inventions to companies, and they pay me royalties for those ideas. And during the whole process, I learned a great deal. Number one, I love those companies that are looking for ideas because I think there's a lot of companies that need ideas from people like us. But also, you need to protect those ideas. And because you have to show the value, you have to have some ownership. So during the whole process, I learned a lot about all the tools. And I realized at the time, if you understand those tools, intellectual property tools, you can play the biggest game in the world, anywhere in the world. And so I guess I'm an inventor, I'm an entrepreneur, someone that has a lot of ideas, and I like to share those ideas with everybody.
Brilliant, brilliant. Yeah, so I mean, having the opportunity to do what we are best in makes always a lot of sense. And you mentioned a first term, which I think it's. I mean, for a long time it's around in the IP world. It's a lot of discussion. So I personally wrote a 900 pages book about that term, and it's value. And obviously, when it comes to values, you ask 5 people, get 10 answers. What that is, how to determine, what are the constituents. Um, uh, so my first question is really about that issue, that this value issue, because basically you can explain a lot of it, but you can confuse people also pretty much with it. So what would you say? What makes a patent valuable from a business perspective? What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I don't think a lot of us are really thinking of it that way. Because the way I look at it, I need to come up with a great idea, and I need to make sure that that idea can be protected. So I'm really concerned with the business objectives of my goals of how to license or venture that idea. So it's really very important if you're an inventor, an entrepreneur, startup, to really know what your goals are. And you really need to understand your point of difference of your product or service compared to everything else that's out there. And you need to do the work. You cannot let someone else do that work. You need to do the work and take responsibility of doing that work. So to make a patent that's valuable is really aligning those claims with your business objective. Okay. They have to be together. And if they're not, that patent's not going to have value. And what I like to do is I break it down to say, all right, I've got this great idea, this great invention. How do I manufacture it? I start there kind of because at the end of the day, if it cannot be manufactured at a price point that the market's going to accept, my patent is not worth anything. So for me, to realize how important that is. So that is extremely important to include the most efficient way that my invention is going to be manufactured. That is critical. That's the foundation, I believe, for me. The second thing I like to do is say, okay, once I figure that out, and sometimes I have to reach out to people in the field, engineers, people that are on the production line. I need that type of knowledge, and I'm going to use that knowledge, of course, and file intellectual property on that knowledge. But I also want to consider how would someone work around my idea, work around my invention? Basically, I'm going to steal it from myself. And when I'm in that mindset, I start to think of all the variations and workarounds. I'm really trying to protect not only that invention, but I think the whole innovation looking ahead. So,
Okay. Some very tricky concepts lie here in what you said. So the first thing is that you said we need an alignment between a patent and a business objective. So that sounds trivial, but for many reasons it isn't. And that starts. So I've worked many years ago as a valuator, as an expert witness, and people came to me, inventors, and said, "Okay, Alex, tell me what is the value of this patent?" I said, "Okay, I don't know. For me, it's just a patent, right? So tell me, what do you want to do with the patent? And then I can tell you what the value in this business scenario will be." Okay. And then they said, no. It's the other way around. You tell me what the value of the patent is, and then I can make my decisions what I want to do with the patent.
hmm.
So that's the first thing. That it is easily said that this alignment has to be there, but that means that we have, I would say, first business objectives, second patents. Quite often it's the opposite, that people have patents and they have no clue what to do with it. And the second thing, so my experience. So the other point, what you mentioned, is also absolutely mission critical. You said we have to distinguish the invention from the innovation. And that is again something which is extremely tricky because most people, so I met in my experience many people who thought that once you have an invention, the innovation is trivial, is obvious. I mean, because it is such a smart invention, uh, the consecutive innovation is just, I mean, is a natural consequence. Yeah, and obviously this is rubbish too. So on these 2 points, how do you help the people with which you work?
Well, I think the reason why I think this is so important that we're having this discussion is that I was in litigation with one of the largest toy companies in the world. And I saw firsthand the power of a patent, if it's written correctly, that if it has the value that another company is trying to infringe, that okay, but also is it written in such a way that you can stop people? Is it written in such a way that it gives people pause to think that they're going to, maybe infringe? And I saw that firsthand in San Francisco federal court, and it was over the words of that was in a patent claims. It was the words. And so I'm very concerned that you understand it so well that you can protect it and tell your patent practitioner what you really need to run your business. What do you really need to compete in the marketplace? What do you really need so people don't step on your toes? And that only as the inventor can you do that, I think. I think if you leave that up to the patent practitioner, I think you're making a big mistake. And I think most people do. But you're right. I
Absolutely.
think at the very beginning, I don't know if everybody really understands what their business objectives at the very beginning. Maybe that's not clear, but I
But
think, yeah.
sorry, isn't it even worse? Because when you say, and I agree 100% with you, yeah, but that's not the point that I agree. When you say that you want to stop people, because at the end of the day, a patent is a forbidding right. And the question is, who can you forbid what with it? And is it then at the end of the day, is that a benefit for you or not that you forbid somebody something? But uh, when you leave the question what exactly I want to patent to the patent attorney, let's say, that is even worse, because most patent attorneys have never ever been involved in a litigation. Typically, they make prosecution. So it's a double mistake, right? So first, it is the question: is the patent attorney the one who should understand and describe your business and put that reasoning into the patent application? And second, does it really make sense that somebody who has no clue about enforcement writing claims which should later on be enforced?
Oh boy.
Just to mention.
I was very fortunate that my patent attorney, they did litigation. So maybe when they were writing those claims, they were taking that in consideration. But I do think there's a connection here. If you haven't been through it, or if you don't litigate, how would you know what strategy to use? So that's a very good question. I don't have an answer for that, but I can tell you, if you're going to be in a big fight, you think there's going to be an issue, you might want to find a patent practitioner, at least their office does some litigation. I think there's some strength in that. It definitely helped me. I know it absolutely. But I do believe what I do, and I don't think my patent attorney could have done this. I look at what I need to protect, and then I look when they write the claims, I make sure they match. So I make a list. I need to protect this, this, this. Show me the claims that protect all these things.
Okay.
So I see a direct match. And that really helps me go, okay, then I have covered this. Without doing that, I think you could be making a mistake. But also realize it's not just about litigation or protecting, it's about taking away risk. I have found that the litigation is very complicated. It's very expensive and time consuming. So I don't really focus so much on that. But what I do is write it in such a way that it answers all the questions companies or investors are going to ask me of the value of it. So it takes away the risk for them to invest in going forward with me. That's what I try to do. And by covering it, by breaking it down and saying, look, I'm going to cover it all these different ways, and I really know my point of difference, and I'm going to cover it all these ways to protect whoever I show it to, whoever reads that understands that I've done a level of detail they don't actually see very often. And that gives them confidence to go forward with me.
Okay.
That's really my strategy here. And I do realize from an inventor, and this is something I don't think I talk about very often, if I can take the manufacturing, the workarounds variations, and I could put the legal part of it together, whoever I'm showing it to, if it's an investor or if it's for a licensing deal, I probably have more knowledge about this than they do. And so I do think that inventors need to take more responsibility for that knowledge. and then help their patent practitioner with that knowledge. So when they go to them, they know exactly what they need, and let them use the language that needs to be written in such a way that gives them all that protection that they need.
Brilliant, brilliant. I think we have a first learning for the audience, because what we said is, okay, we have two parties here. We have the practitioner, the IP expert, and we have the inventor entrepreneur. And basically, the learning is that it is absolutely crucial that the entrepreneur first have an understanding of the future business. What exactly should this forbidden right do for the entrepreneur? That has to be clear, and it has to be discussed. So it is not enough just describing an invention, obviously. On the other side, the IP expert has to explain and has to be asked about, what does that means enforcing a patent? So what exactly can I forbid based on that claims and what not? So which means on the one side, the inventor has to be interested in the patent and what you can do with a patent, and not just be happy that a patent attorney is writing a document, so to speak. And the expert, the IP expert, has to be interested basically on the business side, of what at the end of the day the patent should do, and what should be the impact of it, and take care that that could be done with it, right?
You know what you're explaining to everyone here is, I think there's a missing piece sometimes, and that's that IP strategist. And I don't know if that should be the patent practitioner, although you would think they would participate that way. You would hope that they would participate that way, because there is a strategy at the very beginning of what tools do I need, when do I need them, who am I going up against, how big is the industry, how am I going to navigate in this space. And that's a lot of homework at the very beginning of this, and really understanding uh, how to go forward and working with that patent practitioner as a team, because it is a team, and that is your partner. I hate, people don't, that patent, agent or patent attorney, that's part of your team, and that person's going to help. In fact, it's probably one of the most important part of your team. Okay, so you really have to look at it that way. It's a teamwork, but I do believe your patent attorney or patent agent is only as good as the information you provide them. And if you let them if you just assume that they're going to make good decisions on your behalf, I think I, I think you should have more participation.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that's the most important thing. That thing has to come together. And when you don't provide, when you're not able to provide that kind of information, and then when this is not discussed, because the strong tendency is to discuss the invention per se, and not the business intent. I mean, that is maybe the most important issue here. But I have a first question from Maria Wolsowa-Weinans, and I think so she comes from the opposite, right? So we ask the question, how can we do it right? And she says, okay, Stephen, you have helped thousands of inventors across the globe. I'm curious to hear, what patterns do you see in the kinds of IP mistakes first-time inventors tend to make? And I think we are close to that already. And what could you and how could that be? How could that be prevented?
Well, that's that, wow. I would say the biggest mistake is that they're motivated by fear, that they're rushing. Uh, I do think it's important to file quickly, but also do a little bit of homework along the way. I think they're letting fear guide them without having enough information. I think that's the biggest problem I see. And They think they just need to have a patent for some reason. They probably don't even know why. They just heard that they need one. Hey, you have a great idea, you need to get a patent. Well, okay. So they pick up the phone, they call a patent practitioner, and they say, hey, I've got this invention. They send it over. Well, that's great. That's the first step. But there's so much more to it that we're talking about that someone needs to do. I think it's I think it's education. And I don't think there's enough of it at all different levels of really understanding those tools and how to use those tools. So I think you need to slow it down a little bit. I do believe, though, you can file something fairly quick just to put the first stake in the ground. Okay. And you can build upon it. That's why I love provisional patent applications, because you don't have all the information at the very beginning. And so you can file fairly quickly something and then build upon it within that year. So I'm not saying just stop and do all this work and then file. Maybe you need to file a little quicker. So I think it's education. And I think there's not enough education out there to take away that fear. Yeah.
Got you. Got you. Okay. So I would like to discuss with you about these different ingredients which are necessary, which has to come together to create success. So we talk about patent practitioners. So typically we call them IP experts, but whoever, I mean, we mean the same people. And at the end, the whole thing, and that has to be clear, we invest money. We do not just spend money for IP, for a patent. We want to invest it, and that means it has to anyhow come back to us. Otherwise it isn't an asset. Otherwise we just spend it and we don't care what happens with that money. But when it is an investment and we create an asset, so we expect that anyhow there is a mechanism, an opportunity to bring the money back. And so a good question is what the role of the IP expert, of the patent practitioner is here. So what can they do? How can they behave that at the end the economic benefit of the patent in the innovation, it plays also a role in the innovation. How can we optimize that? What would you say?
Well, that's hard to judge at the very beginning, isn't it? That you're going to make that investment in time and money on an invention that you don't know is marketable. But what I have found, there are some IP experts out there that when you ask them to show me success from their clients, they have a long list. And then you can ask other IP experts the same question, and they don't have a long list. So that's a very interesting thing to me. Why are some IP experts more successful with their clients than others? And I think that comes down to uh, giving them good advice, meaning asking them, once again, what are your goals? For instance, if you're going to be selling online, and that's where you're going to venture, you're going to sell online, you're not really interested in selling at retailers, maybe a design patent is what you need. Maybe a good trademark is what you need. Maybe copyright. Maybe a utility patent is something you don't really need because you're not going to go and defend it. And those other tools can stop those copycats pretty quickly. That's good business advice. I believe if your IP expert cares that way, that client will be successful. They're going to come back and file more IP. See, it's not a short-term thing. It's a long-term thing. And I've realized my patent attorney gave me great advice at the very beginning. And I've spent probably $500,000 with him because of that advice. He said, Steve, protection's easy. Selling is hard. So make sure whatever you're doing, you can sell it. Make sure you've done the type of homework up front. I can protect it. I'm good at that. but you need to determine if this if it's a good business decision by really doing your homework. So I don't think anybody knows at the very beginning, but I think caring about your customer, knowing their budget restraints, knowing what their goals are, and making sure they're getting the right education along the way, they're going to come back and file more intellectual property. And you're going to see more success if that IP expert takes that time to really understand the client's needs.
But coming from a very practical standpoint, okay, so we have different expertise. So what I try to explain to people again and again, that something like an IP expert doesn't exist. I mean, this is a nice ideal, but typically what you get is you have a trademark expert, you have a copyright expert, you have a patent attorney. So that is, all of these instruments are incredibly complex, and even they, I mean, what you said, there is a kind of, let's say, IP strategist. That is something completely different. But these experts, it's like, yeah, I mean, you have to know how to use that, how to make use of them for getting your interest and to meet your objectives. And that is something. Do you really think that education or training is a tool which helps here?
Well, you have to realize you cannot put that responsibility on that IP expert. I would like to, but I don't think it's appropriate. I used to think so, but that's not their job.
Yeah.
And so once you realize it's not their job, then you better find out whose job is it. It's probably yours. And who do you need to navigate that and understand that from a business perspective? Because I think they're completely different. If I protect something that has no value in the marketplace, you're right, I have a plaque on the wall that's not worth anything. So I always look at it, from my perspective, what I do is that I do a little bit of testing first to see if I've got something that the market wants. And then I know the tools to go forward with after I do a little bit of testing. But I think everybody does it backwards. I'm going to protect it first and then see if anybody wants it.
Exactly.
You know, I think that's a recipe for a disaster. But I think that's what everybody's doing, and I don't think you're going to be in this wonderful game of being an entrepreneur very long if you're filing intellectual property on your ideas without knowing if they have any value.
But when you say, I mean, I'm loving what you say, because I think too that the typical way of starting with patenting something and then checking whether somebody wants it, this is something what, I mean, there is a branch which is working in that way, and this is pharmaceutical and maybe chemistry, that are typically very big companies with very deep pockets. And it is simply so that they have no other chance than making their R&D results, so creating these molecules and filing them, basically all of them, and then checking out which one is the blockbuster. And these blockbusters has then to pay the checks for all of these other not successful inventions, so molecules or pharmaceuticals or whatever. And the problem is that most people think they are in that kind of, let's say, mode, yeah, in this kind of strategy, but this is completely rubbish. The typical situation is that you have something which is not that new, like a new molecule, and in terms of everything is new, and you can really patent the whole product. So typically an aspect is new, or a kind of differentiation or whatever. And I like really much what you say. So just test it. So be agile, be early as possible, get in contact with your potential customers, blah blah blah. But we have the provision that something has to be new, and that means that it should not be published before we can patent it. So how we can overcome that?
Well, That's really interesting. I do think in that particular industry, they've got the data and they've got the marketing research and they've done enough homework to know that there's a pretty big demand for this. And that to me, what I like to do is test and see if there's market demand. And the big guys are going to do the same thing. They have much more data and resources to do that. So they can make some pretty good educated guesses that, hey, if we can solve this particular issue, we're going to have a great opportunity to create a lot of revenue. Okay. So they're doing their own research. I'm doing my own research. I'm testing it in such a way to go, all right, I'm going to pull the trigger on this. Now, I still have to solve an issue and come up with a great solution and protect it. Okay. But I like doing that work up front a little bit. And that way it gives me the green light that it's okay to keep on spending those dollars and investing those dollars because there's going to be a return. So I think all businesses are a lot of them are doing that. I don't think independent inventors are doing that though. I don't think they're looking at it that way, or maybe they don't know the tools to test. The projects I work on, I always test the market first, and I can do that without disclosing anything. See, that's the other issue too. You've got to make sure that you can test the benefit of an idea. I don't need to test the intellectual property yet. I need to test, does the benefit of my idea create enough interest that someone's going to want it? So that's what I do. That way I'm not disclosing anything. Then if it gives me a green light, then I come back and do the homework to protect the intellectual property to deliver that benefit.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, that is what design thinking means, or other agile methodologies to be as soon as possible in interaction with the customers, with the potential customers,
Yeah.
and to ask about the potential customer value and discussing that with them. And yeah, of course. I mean, that what you say is I think extremely important to the inventors, that the first signals from the market are important, and then you come up with something which could solve the issue, and then you can think about and that about IP, but it is market driven, so to speak, and not technology
Yes.
or inventor driven.
Yeah. Because to me, if you cannot sell the benefit, why do the rest of the work? I mean, so that's why to stay in this world of innovation, to me, it's really quite simple. I'm going to sell the benefit first, and if I can do that, then it tells me, all right, do the rest of the work. But if I cannot sell it, why bother?
Got you. So when we talk about entrepreneurs or inventors and IP, so the typical situation is that there is a certain, let's say, lack of understanding. So um, uh, quite often I hear that inventors have the perspective on it that a patent is a kind of, inventor award, and because something is patent, it has a value. Because it is patented, it has a benefit to customers. It should attract customers because it's a patented solution. So I'm not convinced about that, to be honest. And so the question to you would be, so what should inventors know about IP to create a long-term success? So, as you
Mm.
said, it's not a sprint; it's a marathon. We have to go a long distance to get this. Because even when Hollywood tells us the different, um, tells us that things can happen extremely fast, and just the next scene you are a millionaire, and before you had your invention. But that's typically not what we see in practice. So when entrepreneurs want to get this long-term success, what do they should know about IP? What would you recommend?
Well, I think inventors, they either think it's a patent problem, a prototype problem, or a money problem that's holding them back somehow. No, it's not any one of those three. It's a knowledge problem. And I'm a big believer in education, saying, look, if you've got a great idea, you know, there's some really simple tools to give you ownership of that. And if you can do that the correct way, you can find your funding, you can find your partnerships, you can find your licensees. So I wouldn't worry so much about that. Let's talk about that idea first, and is it marketable? So that's what I would tell anybody. You know, the rest of it's just, they're just things to do. You know, IP are tools. They're like a hammer or a nail. They're just tools to build that success that you want. But you need to understand what they are, and you need to fully grasp that if you file a patent that doesn't have any value, you have a very expensive plaque on the wall, and there's a very good chance you might not do it again. So I think the biggest problem I see is that if you fail, and trust me, you're going to fail, you know, but if you fail too many times, you won't do it again. And that to me, we have to correct that, because I think I'm a big believer, once you learn about the tools and you learn about testing, you can play the biggest game in the world anywhere. It doesn't matter where you live today. And I've seen it firsthand, how you could leverage ownership of your creativity in such a way to do some really amazing things. And the other thing I do want to stress, though, having a patent does feel good, right? But that's not enough. That isn't enough, in my opinion. What's really incredible, and that's why I'm glad I'm here today, is if you can come up with a great idea, and if you can protect it and you can bring it to market, you're going to see magic happen. To see an idea come to life, to see an idea on the store shelf or on TV or people using it, that's
Yeah.
why we're talking about this. That's the magic. And that is an incredible experience. And you could only do that if you have those IP tools, I think. It makes it much easier. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Got you. So David Carlo has a very interesting question. So obviously we confused our audience with this idea of testing something without revealing the invention.
I
Okay.
know. I love
So
it.
obviously there is there is this
Okay.
difference between what is the benefit of having something. Yeah. So first of all, I would say people don't buy technology. They don't buy any inner mechanics. What they really want is a benefit, and they
Yes.
want to understand
Yeah.
for what they pay, and what at the end how you realize it. Typically, people don't care. But the question is to you. So, could you
Okay.
explain a little bit more?
Sure.
How can we test it without disclose it?
Well, you're absolutely right. They're not buying the product. They're buying the product, but they really want the results of that product. They want the benefit of it. That's what they're. So you need to explain the benefit of it. And I could explain this very quickly. Let's say I have a new hammer, and this hammer has a softer handle, and the material's stronger, and it's got a bigger head, so I can work longer and harder on any project. So I can watch TV on Saturday and watch football or whatever. But I've got this amazing, innovative hammer. Okay, so I could call a company that's making hammers and say, hey, I've got this hammer that's going to let you work twice as hard, twice as fast, and be more productive. Would you like to see it? Because the benefit of that hammer innovation is that's the results. That's the benefit. I can test it just by explaining it. I don't have to show it. I don't need a video. I don't need a sell sheet. I can just say, hey, the benefit of my product does this. And once you realize that as entrepreneurs, you're always selling benefits. And I can do that with the video. I could do that all these different ways. But the point is, if I can really come up with that one line benefit statement of that idea, I don't need to show how I'm going to do it. I don't need to show the intellectual property, but I do need to understand the value proposition of that idea and present it in such a way they get it and want to know more. And once they want to know more, that's when it tells me maybe I file or have them sign an NDA or go down a different road. That's how I do it.
I would like to add some things, David, and this is, you know that Stephen Jobs was a genius in doing what Stephen is just explaining to us. And there is this famous story about the iPod, and people, they didn't get what an iPod is. So an iPod did not exist before, and people did not listening to real tracks. So they had albums and all of that thing. So the whole digital music was something new for 80-90% of the market. And the question was, how can we sell an iPod? And the original idea from the technicians was, okay, we tell the people that this is a hard disk drive, and this hard disk drive has 2 gigabyte memory storage. So nobody, literally nobody, has any idea what 2 gigabyte means. Yeah, so what is that? And then Steve says, okay, at the end, they want one thing. They want songs in their pocket. And then he said, you get 2,000 songs in your pocket. Do you want that? And that's it. I mean, this is exactly what Stephen told us here, that nobody is interested how you make it shock observant, that you can make a run or jogging with it. So yeah, it simply, it has these characteristics, and I would like to have it. That's it. And now now go home and make your homework and solve all the technical problems which are aligned by that with that.
Thank you so much for telling that story, because I've told that story many times. And you're right. I mean, no one cares about how it's going to be done, but boy, I would sure like to have a couple thousand songs in my pocket. So that's brilliant. And I think he was a genius at that. Absolutely.
So we have quite a sophisticated discussion about provisional applications in the chat. So obviously what I learned from the chat is that you are a fan of it. Stephen, we have only 2 minutes left. So
right.
I give you 1 minute to make a pitch for provisional applications, and we are listening very careful.
I absolutely love provisional applications because you can just start and you can keep on adding more within that year. It gives you patent pending status. It's a great tool. You have to do it right. Don't get me wrong. You need some probably guidance, but it just allows you to get started and write it in your own words. And what's really important, that when you do write it in your own words, write it in such a way that anybody can understand it. Make it simple. Make it so someone can visualize it and understand exactly what you're trying to, the problem, the solution, but add everything you possibly can to that PPA, from workarounds, variations, manufacturing. Have great drawings. That tool alone can get you started. And you can do that. It's very affordable, and you can do that just about anywhere. And you can file that and get started by saying, hey, I've got patent pending, and then collect all that information within that year to keep on adding more PPAs, combine them all together. It's a fantastic tool. I absolutely love it.
Thank you very much. And you stayed in this 1 minute. You are really a professional. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. I think so. All what I see is in the chat that people loving you and loving your ideas, and it is absolutely obvious. And you're so successful with that. So we can only recommend to inventors to follow your procedures, your ideas, and at the end of the day, come to you and work with you. That makes so much sense. So thank you very much for taking the time. And I'm quite sure that this was not the last live interview with two of us. So we should join again and discuss these issues. So have a great time in San Jose for the moment. So I'm inviting you to be there in California, and but even in Germany we get some spring feelings now. Thank you very much, Stephen. Enjoy your time. Bye bye. Thanks to the audience.
Thank you very much.